What's up, guys? Welcome to this edition of a Funko podcast. I'm DK Wrestler.
And I'm MD Shady.
And in today's podcast, we have ourselves a getting to know episode. Now, this is actually something we had already done previously, but the last time we did this was back in 2020 when we first began weekly podcasts. Now we are so many years later with so many new subscribers and fans to the channel that we thought we would revisit this as a new topic for our podcast, hence the title being called Getting to Know Us ... again, which in this podcast, simply we're going to talk about ourselves. And then we also have questions that you guys sent in throughout our YouTube community tabs page and the Instagram page. But of course, we're actually going to kick off this podcast with a segment that we did have previously on our podcast. And we thought we'd bring it back for what might be the last time ever, considering we don't know when we're going to bring back this segment, that being What's the Haps. So those new to the podcast, What's the Haps is the segment where pretty much we talk about what's been happening in our life the last week or so, whether it's watching movies and TV shows, playing video games, anything that life has brought to us recently, which I guess I'll start off first because there's nothing much that I have in mind besides I've been playing Fortnite a little bit recently, which I kind of was a little bit on a hiatus for like a month just because of being busy with the channel. And then I guess also I'll mention that today, as we're recording this podcast, I officially am back at work after being off for literally 9 weeks. That's all I got. What's the haps with you?
What is the haps with me? I mean, video game wise, I have been playing NHL mostly. That's pretty much it. Mostly just Hockey Ultimate Team and also playing with my EA SHL team. But honestly, haven't really been doing that much. I've been working quite a bit. For TV shows and stuff, I actually just started a new show recently, which is only 8 episodes long, and it is, go figure, a cooking show called Snack vs. Chef. And I definitely recommend it. It's a pretty cool show, especially if you like snack food or if you like cooking. It definitely fits both of those worlds. As well as another show that I recently just picked up is Young Sheldon, which I've been really enjoying. My mom thoroughly enjoys that show. So I figured, you know what, I might as well give it a try. I mean, it's really good. It's funny. And the actor, I'm not sure what his name is, that plays Sheldon, it's amazing how his acting skills are just so good that he literally just seems like it is Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory when he was younger. And I mean, that's the whole premise of the show. Besides that, I haven't really been watching too much. The other day, I did watch a movie called The Package, which does have the actor who plays Argyle in Stranger Things. And that movie was hilarious. I don't know, there's not really much else that I've really been doing on my free time. I have been painting some shoes, which is a lot of fun. I think DK could probably throw a picture up of the pair that I just finished, which is Toy Story themed. And I know that he definitely enjoyed that pair, and I really enjoy it too, especially how they turned out. I'm currently working on a pair for my lady friend for Valentine's Day. Those are going pretty good as well. And I might start another pair later on today as well. I just really enjoy painting a lot recently. It's something that I haven't done in a while, and I'm glad to pick it back up, especially when you can do it on shoes where you can wear it. So maybe in the future we'll do some kind of like box painting of a Funko Pop that I could possibly do as a video idea, because I don't know, I think that that's a cool idea and I enjoy it. But besides that, I guess I really haven't been doing all that much. So that's what's the haps with me.
All right, so I guess we can officially kick off this podcast of Getting to Know Us again by basically the same way we kind of kicked off the last Getting to Know Us, which was actually more of a segment on a pod rather than a full-on pod. And I think it's a question that surprisingly no one asked for the questions, and that is, how did DK Wrestler and MD Shady meet? I guess I'll let you explain. I don't know why. I'm just going to let you explain.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, how did we meet? We met quite some time ago now at this point. We met in grade 3 at the original elementary school that I went to. So we went to that elementary school for 1 year. And it's kind of funny how it worked, because I was at this one school and then DK had joined me at that school. But then after 1 year of being students together there, I actually went to the school that he came from, but we continued to be friends and have sleepovers and do all this cool stuff. And I don't know, history just took it from there. And now it's been close to, I don't know, 17, 18 years, I think.
Yeah, it's got to be something along the lines of that. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. As terms to interest, I guess we'll get into there. So for me, interest that I got, obviously, I had to kind of jot down notes from the previous podcast because I totally forgot what I had said during that podcast. But some of the things that I wrote down, collecting WWE figures, obviously, because I mean, one of my earliest memories is being interested in WWE. I mean, obviously, hence the name DK Wrestler. I ended up becoming a wrestler later on. So it's crazy how that turned out. So yeah, I collected a lot of WWE figures. Some ended up being mint, some ended up being not so mint because I would somehow transform figures to other characters. Like I remember having a Billy Gunn
John
action
Cena?
figure. Oh yeah, the John Cena. Oh yeah, that's okay. So I guess we'll talk about that. How I didn't have a figure of the Boogeyman, if anyone knows that for wrestling. So I painted my John Cena figure red, saying that it's the Boogeyman because I didn't have a Boogeyman, but I had an extra John Cena. But where I was going to get to was I had a Billy Gunn, and I thought it would be a great idea to make him as the Joker. So I painted his face white, added like red lipstick and stuff, and then like green face paint on top of that. It's crazy. I just looked through some of my old wrestling figures recently when I had moved over the summer. I'm like, why did I just trash this wrestler? You know, I guess that's the mind of like a 6 or 7 year old at the time when you get wrestling figures like that. I remember I still do have some of the newer figures that obviously aren't trashed. They're in good condition. I collected Star Wars figures back in the day, but more specifically, the Star Wars figures you got when you collected the coin set for Revenge of the Sith. And I remember mentioning on that pod how I stopped collecting those because I was so like persistent on wanting to collect them in numerical order where I'd gotten like 1 to 5. And then I went to a store that we had in Canada. Actually, now as I think about it, it's actually making its return in Canada called Zellers, where I went there. And then when I went to go find number 5, they didn't have it, but they had like 6 to 12 or something like that. And I said, I can't do it because I need to get number 5 before I get 6 to 12. And stupid me, those figures are probably worth a decent amount of money now, especially of all the coins. There's like, I want to say 30 to 50 coins in that coin book, which is a pretty sweet thing to collect back in the day. Webkins I used to collect back in the day, the stuffed animals with the codes, and you go on the website, and that website surprisingly still exists. I seen someone on Snapchat recently like logging into their Webkins account. I'm like, wow, okay. And then I guess also I collected CDs back in the day of like my favorite bands and stuff. Like to this day, I have every single Green Day album that has been made on CD from their very first one in 1990 all the way until their recent one, which would have been 2020, actually. Yeah, now as I was going to say 2016, but no, Father of All would have been their last album right before the pandemic hit. And I guess that's basically it. I mean, as terms to other interests, I mean, I guess that leads to like some of the pops that I collect, like Toy Story. I mean, Toy Story is a movie that I've always loved, all 4 of them pretty much equally. WWE, like I mentioned, I collect the pops for those also. The Office was one of my favorite TV shows, so I collect pretty much almost all the pops. I almost have the set completed. I'm only off by like 7 or 8 pops. And then there's Back to the Future, which is one of my favorite movie franchises of all time, even to the point where if you told me between, let's say, Back to the Future and Star Wars, which one would I keep and which one has ceased to exist, I would say you're gone, Star Wars, Back to the Future, which is a hot take. I know that even MD just like, what the did you just say, pal? But yeah, I love Back to the Future. And then Crash Bandicoot, I grew up playing as a video game, as like one of the first games I played. It was like that game and Gran Turismo on the PS1 of all systems. So I collect the pops for those also. And then a TV series I watched while growing up, or more of an anime actually, but no one really wants to acknowledge it as that, is Yu-Gi-Oh! I actually just recently watched the other day. I was at a buddy's house and they had Tubi, the free subscription service, and they had all 5 seasons of Yu-Gi-Oh! So like I was watching like an episode or 2 on there. But man, so good to watch those episodes again. But yeah, that's basically all my interests, I guess. I guess we'll go on to MD. He's got a lot more interests and a lot more things that he collects than what I just listed.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with my collecting. I definitely do collect a lot of stuff, and I kind of always have throughout my entire life. I mean, right now, Funko is definitely a big one. Obviously, we have this channel where that's the majority of what we talk about is Funko. So yeah, for Funko, I guess I will start off. The things that I collect the most of are Simpsons. I love the Simpsons pops. There's something about it. It's such a huge set. Simpsons is such a great show, and they're pretty easily accessible besides some of those OG ones. Probably my absolute favorite thing to collect with Funko is the ad icons, and I think the reason for that is because of the nostalgia that you feel when you see these characters in figure form, which is awesome to see. I love that Funko has done ad icons, and yeah, definitely one of my favorite things ever to collect. Besides that, also WWE pops, I do have a decent collection of those. Pop Rocks, anything Jim Henson. I love Jim Henson, and I guess that will transition now over to other collections, which I remember in grade 7 or 8 is really when I kind of started collecting a lot of Jim Henson stuff. I started collecting basically anything I get my hands on, whether it was Sesame Street or Muppets or The Dark Crystal or Labyrinth, which is an amazing movie that my life changed when I watched that movie, I think, because it's just so good. Rest in peace, David Bowie, I suppose. But yeah, besides that, I mean, there's tons of stuff that I collect. I also collect wrestling figures. That's something that actually started pretty much the year that I met DK. We kind of, me, him, and someone who was also featured on the channel every once in a while, Robbie D. We all kind of had this common interest of wrestling. So yeah, I kind of started collecting wrestling figures then, and I still collect wrestling figures to this day. Star Wars figures. Star Wars is a huge part of my life, so I do have a ton of Star Wars stuff. I did sell a lot of my Star Wars stuff years and years ago because it was getting too much. Besides that, what else? I mean, I collect a ton of stuff. Gremlins is one of my favorite movies of all time, so I do have a pretty extensive Gremlins collection, which is always growing. It's usually whenever me and DK go to a toy show or a Comic-Con, I usually make a mental list of things that I'm looking for that I need to check off this list before I leave. And a Gremlins item is always an item on there. And usually I do find something, but recently it has been getting a little bit tougher because I do have quite a bit of stuff. So it's mostly either super OG stuff that I don't have from when the movie first came out that I'm kind of looking to find, but it's really hard to find nowadays, or some of the new NECA figures, which are just amazing. Besides that, I collect video games. I've collected video games for quite a while now, and I like where my collection's going. I have a lot of boxed consoles, whether it's Nintendo 64. I have a couple different NESs that are boxed with Rob the Robot and stuff like that. And a pretty decent collection of video games for sure. Another thing that I love collecting is just McDonald's merchandise. And maybe that does have ties to the ad icons with my Funko collection, because I guess it kind of goes hand in hand. But I love collecting different McDonald's stuff, whether it is actual like promotional items that is specifically like Ronald McDonald and Grimace and Birdie, or whether it is these toys that we grew up with from the Happy Meals. I do want to have a actual spot to display all that stuff, because currently I buy it and I throw it in tote bins and I don't really look at it. But I definitely do have a lot of stuff that maybe one day we can showcase on the channel. Interests, what else? I mean, yeah, hockey. You guys know that. Wrestling, obviously. I'm not a wrestler like DK, but I do like everything that goes on with wrestling and hockey, like I said. Golfing, obviously, you guys have heard me on the channel probably talk about. I like to go golfing, and unfortunately we do live in Canada, so in the winter, if I'm not going to the simulator, which doesn't happen too often, there's just no golf to be had. So I haven't gone golfing in a while, so I can't wait for spring to come around so I can start golfing again. So I have obviously art. I did talk about painting those shoes earlier. Art has been something that's been big in my life, and I feel like collecting and art kind of came from my dad, because my dad always did art. He always collected a ton of stuff, which was mostly like Kiss memorabilia, which I still do collect to this day, and superhero stuff like Marvel and DC. But art, I love doing art. I do paintings. I don't really draw as much as I used to, but I do like painting stuff. I feel like that is one of my favorite things to do. And that's why I've been loving painting shoes recently, because it's something that you can actually wear and kind of display the art that you've done. Besides that, I don't know. I guess I have a ton of interests, so I could go on and on about all the stuff I collect and all the stuff I like to watch, but I'll just keep it sweet with that.
All right. So I guess this is where we go on to the questions from our viewers. And there are some pretty solid questions, not going to lie. There wasn't entirely too many, but they're all pretty solid questions, not going to lie. So first one comes from our buddy Pat over at Pops and Props. And he actually had sent quite a bit of questions, which was okay if you sent a lot of questions for it. We appreciate the amount of questions. So the first question, I've always wondered, ... Do you have a day job? So I guess I'll answer that first. And I guess I'll tie it into the person, I don't remember his name, who constantly asks how I'm able to afford my Funko Pops and the Funko NFTs. And it's simple. I sell my body on the corner of King and Lincoln. That's just, that's the obvious answer, right? Right? No, I'm kidding. No, for me, besides, I'll admit, obviously, YouTube is technically a job, considering that you can tell from our ads, we are monetized for our channel. And for me, I guess also wrestling. I work for a corporation, I should say, that is hired by a grocery store to stock shelves. And we have these things called planograms where we have to look at exactly what stuff we have to put in the exact spot on the shelf. And sometimes it can get hectic where basically it's almost the same thing except flipped around. So if it's on one side of the shelf, it's got to go on the other, and you're basically mixing everything up. Or it's just you take everything off and it's got to be moved on a completely different shelf. But there's also those days where they're in the exact spot, so you don't have to do much. So that's always decently well.
All right, yeah, and then there's me, MD Shady. Of course, like DK said, YouTube, of course, is something that we strive to put out good content, and hopefully that pays off and stuff. So yeah, that is a part of it. But my actual full-time job, I work in a restaurant. I knew from a pretty young age that I wanted to be a cook because I loved watching cooking shows and all this. And now that I'm in the industry, I mean, it's not quite as cracked up as it seems to be when you see it on television, but I still love it. It is very, very stressful, but it's just, there is some rewards to it, which is obviously great. But the job that I work at is at a restaurant that I started working at in high school. So I've been there for over 8 years now, and that's crazy. I was actually talking to my coworkers the other day about saying that because I'm 25 years old, I have worked at this place for 1/3 of my life, which is just insane to think about that way. It doesn't really seem like it because time flies, but yeah, crazy. I love the job. I hate the job. That's any job. But yeah, it keeps me on my feet. I mean, I work mostly a lot of overtime hours every week. So yeah, if anyone's wondering, that's kind of what feeds the Funko collection, though my money goes into a lot of other things, considering I named off a ton of other things that I collect earlier in this pod.
All right, next question comes from _boy_Cameron_77_, or as I'm going to say, yeah, boy. Do you guys play video games? Yes, I certainly play video games. As I mentioned on the What's a Hap segment, I play Fortnite, and I haven't really been playing that long. Our friend Robbie D, like we mentioned earlier, got me into Fortnite, and it was a game originally that I thought was like not good. And that's like kind of like the perception of a lot of people, even if like you haven't played it, is like, oh, it doesn't look good, blah, blah, blah. And then I tried it out and it's like, cool, not bad. And then now here we are about just over a year later since playing Fortnite for the first time. And then I've gotten so many skins and I still play it pretty much religiously. I like to play some of the WWE games. I used to be the guy that bought every single wrestling game like every year, but I felt like a lot of the times the roster doesn't change entirely that much besides a couple of superstars and not really any new game modes. So I stopped doing that since I believe 2K18, but I think I am planning on going to get the WWE 2K23 game when it comes out in March, especially with the additions of like Cody Rhodes, and especially War Games is going to be a thing in the game. So I'm going to be freaking pumped when I play that. And then like I mentioned also with my interest is Crash Bandicoot, pretty much the first video game I ever played, and still probably is my favorite video game series of all time, which you guys can hear my opinion about that on our fandom related podcast we did 2 years ago, I guess, at this point, on Crash Bandicoot and how much I loved that game. So that's all I can think of. I'm sure there's more that I obviously played, but those are like the top games that I could think of that I guess I would currently play at the moment.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I do have a pretty big collection of video games. So yes, I do play video games. Thanks for the question. Yeah, boy, it's cool to see that you put in a question. Yeah, I mean, I think the first ever video game that I can actually remember playing, there's two, and it's kind of a toss-up. One is Super Mario World on the N64, my favorite game of all time. I feel like that's probably the first game that I ever played. Just have so many reminiscing times of that, and a lot of different games on the Super Nintendo. I had an awesome Super Nintendo collection, and I still have that collection, which is awesome to say. But besides that, I feel like another game that I remember playing in my early childhood, and I don't even think I played much of it or really understood how to play it, was The Grinch on the PS1. Just such a weird memory that I have from so long ago now at this point. But besides that, for like newer games, obviously, yeah, I do play WWE games. I play NHL. I love Rocket League. I'll pretty much play any game, actually. Like, I unfortunately don't have a ton of time to game as much as I used to, but so many games. I mean, Guitar Hero, Rock Band, I can name a ton of stuff.
Anyone who is viewing this podcast and had never sent in a question through the YouTube community tab or through our Instagram, comment in the comment section below a question and we will reply to your comment on this podcast for further questions. I'm sure there's people that regularly view this channel and never got to send in a question. So if you have a question, send it to us. We'll reply to it. But the next question, I forgot that this question was sent, and I love when questions like this get sent. It's from @BastionDerek, who actually is one of those avid viewers of our channel. Top 5 wrestlers of all time for MD and DK. I can easily do a top 10, but shrinking it down to top 5 is a little difficult. My top 2, I guess I would say, no specific order. I got to say Undertaker is one. That's who basically got me into wrestling. And then Randy Orton. That's another one that I've always been huge fans of. But then you shrinking it down to like 3 more people left. I think maybe one I have to mention has got to be Chris Jericho. I just love the way that he's always reinventing himself. He's a Canadian, of course. You got to say some good things about Canadians. I guess I have to add like Bret Hart onto that list. Like, who does? Oh, I mean, I'm sure there's people that don't like Bret Hart, but I mean, Bret Hart put on some great matches. And then one more. Oh, man. Now I got to think of one more I'm going to say The Rock, just for sake of an Attitude Era guy. If I was a Rock or a Stone Cold fan, I got to say The Rock.
All right, fair enough. Definitely putting me on the spot here with these 5 because I definitely have 2 in mind. One is a hot take. Let's say this isn't like your Mount Rushmore. I guess I'll start at number 5 and I'm gonna put Triple H there. I think Triple H is sometimes underappreciated. I mean, what a character that Triple H is and how far he's come in this business. And then I will say Randy Orton. I mean, Randy Orton is insane. I mean, I think he has the most pay-per-view matches of all time, which is a crazy feat. That is something that's just amazing over his career. At number 3, I suppose I will put John Cena. That is the hot take. I know a lot of people hate John Cena, but I mean, he is one of those faces of wrestling. He carried the business throughout some hard times with the business. So that's really good. And I mean, he's a great superstar. I know that his moveset might not be the best, and that is kind of what people hate. And he's so babyface and he always wins and he's got the golden shovel and all these things. But John Cena is one of the best. And a lot of people, you just can't deny that. At number 2, I'm going to say The Undertaker because it's Taker. I mean, he is that guy in the locker room. I mean, he's one of those guys that has had this gimmick for his whole career, and he's changed it up slightly over sometimes with like American Badass and all these different things. Just an amazing wrestler, and it's great to see where his career has gone. Obviously, some people don't like the streak ending and all that, but nonetheless, Undertaker is amazing. And then number 1, it has to go to Eugene. What a great wrestler. I always talk about Eugene. I love Eugene. All jokes aside, we do joke a lot about Eugene, and I wish he did return at the Rumble because it looks like he is retiring basically from professional wrestling after this year. So that kind of sucks because that's a long going joke that me and DK do have. But my number 1 favorite wrestler of all time is Adam Copeland, Edge. I mean, there was just something about him when I first started watching wrestling, and then with like the character that he was, and he was this tag team with Christian, obviously, and then he's now like one of the greatest of all time. I mean, he's amazing. I think he holds basically the most titles of anybody if you don't include the 24/7 title, because then that would be R-Truth, which is just ridiculous. But yeah, Edge is amazing. Good Canadian boy, and will forever be my favorite wrestler of all time.
This next one comes from our buddy Spencer over at Combo Collectibles, and he asks, what's your favorite breakfast cereal? There's a couple in mind. I know my number 1, and that's where I'm going to lead to, just in case I say it, and then it was like, oh, why isn't your favorite cereal this? So these are pretty much my, even though it says favorite breakfast cereal as terms to 1, which I guess, you know what, I'll just mention it. So my favorite cereal is Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I've always enjoyed that cereal, especially all of the spin-offs like Churros Toast Crunch, French Toast Crunch, the Caramel Toast Crunch. They even just recently released a cinnamon, like I almost said, cinnamon roll Toast Crunch, where it's in the shape of like cinnamon rolls. But then my close second and thirds will always be Lucky Charms and Frosted Flakes.
All right, that's pretty cool. I feel like my favorite cereal has changed so much, but there's always one that comes to mind. So I guess I'll just quickly go over the evolution of what I think used to be my favorite cereal. And my favorite used to be Corn Pops when I was young. I loved Corn Pops for whatever reason. It was always the cereal that my grandparents had when I'd sleep over at their house. And then I feel like there was a long part of my life where I loved Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I mean, it is just one of the best cereals. It's so good. But my favorite of all time is Lucky Charms. And I feel like The reason for that is because it is like a milder flavor. You don't have like the super sweetness to it. And that's what, when you get the marshmallows, that's what kind of adds to it. It's just this cereal that you can't really get, I guess you could get bored with it, but it's one that will never be too crazy. It'll never be like, okay, this is too sweet. It's just one of those cereals that's awesome. It does have an amazing mascot with Lucky the Leprechaun. And there are different versions of Lucky Charms. I mean, there was like the chocolate one that they did. I don't know if they still do that. They always switch up the marshmallows every once in a while. Lucky Charms is just superior in my mind.
All right, so the next question comes from at Thyron Hang, which hopefully I pronounced that name right, on Instagram, in which the question that they sent was, what's your favorite movie of 2022? There's a lot of movies that, like, I'll be honest, 2022 wasn't entirely like I could think of some movies off the top of my mind. Like, obviously, as terms to MCU, there was Multiverse of Madness, Thor: Love and Thunder, and Wakanda Forever. And then Lightyear came out in 2022. So I got a lot to choose from. And then there's more than that. But I think, if anything, I'm going to say my favorite overall was probably Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I believe that came out in February, if I'm not mistaken. And I really enjoyed that, especially seeing Knuckles on the big screen. And I can't wait for the third movie, especially obviously if you had seen basically the end credit scene.
Was No Way Home 2022?
No, that was right at the end of 2021. Like, that was December 2021.
Okay, I think I seen it in January in the theaters, and that might be why I'm thinking of that. Yeah, I mean, I didn't see a lot of movies from 2022 at the theaters. Obviously, I did watch Lightyear on Disney Plus. I didn't go see Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which was unfortunate. I did plan to go see it with one of my coworkers, where we had gone to see Sonic the Hedgehog, the first movie. I feel like Top Gun Maverick was a 2022 release, right?
It was, and I actually have not seen that yet, which I know I'm missing out. A lot of people I've only said great things about that movie.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Top Gun. It was kind of out of nowhere. I mean, my one coworker asked me, he's like, "Hey, you want to go watch Top Gun tonight?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So we had a couple of adult beverages and sat there and watched Top Gun. And as much as some people hate Tom Cruise, the movie was phenomenal. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I'll go with Top Gun Maverick for my favorite movie of 2022. But that's up for debate because there are a lot of movies that I haven't watched yet.
All right, this question comes from at Peter.Storch1. Hopefully I said that right once again. What is the best Funko Pop in your collection from collecting for a long time? That's what it was worded as. I'm assuming it's just, what's your favorite Funko Pop in your collection? I always mention that my favorite is the 2018 New York Comic Con exclusive Pizza Planet van with Buzz Lightyear pop rides. There's something about that pop that's just, it's so different from other pop rides we've seen. You don't get that like rectangle cut from the top of the vehicle and then the pops in there. It's almost like tinier than even a mystery mini kind of put into it. Exactly how the movie scene was, where it's Buzz Lightyear controlling an actual van. So the size proportion was basically right. The detail with like the mud and the tires. It's a great pop and still my favorite to this day. And I don't know a pop that could honestly surpass that.
This is kind of a tough question for me because there are a lot of pops in my collection where it's like, wow, this is the best pop. This is amazing. But I generally always go with one answer, and that is the Zach Morris pop from Saved by the Bell. It was the first ever pop that I bought, and it started off my collection. And I love Saved by the Bell, and that is kind of the thing that got me into Funko, was that they started making some stuff for properties that don't really get merchandise, and Saved by the Bell was one of them. So the Zach Morris is an awesome pop, and me and DK actually did go and meet Mark Paul Gosselaar, and I did get it signed. So not only is it my first pop, it's my favorite pop, and it's signed by the guy who plays Zach Morris, and I had an awesome conversation with him about Funko stuff. So that just makes the pop even better when you have a story behind it.
All right, this one also comes from at Pops and Props. How'd you get into Funko Pop collecting? Which is why I didn't kick off with that, because I knew it was going to be one of these questions. MD and I pretty much started at the same time. I think he started just a bit after me, but what I can mention is that we went to Hamilton Comic Con in, I believe, 2015 with our buddy Justin, and I'm roaming around. I'm seeing what I want to buy. I've seen pop figures before, but obviously this is back in the mid 2010s, where Like they're not entirely as detailed as we see them today. So I've seen them before, but nothing really piqued my eye. I think maybe at that time I was like, oh, maybe I'll see if there's a WWE one. But obviously I seen the OG Buzz Lightyear, which at the time was $60, and I think now is doubled in price. So I guess good profit on that if I were to sell it, which I am not because of obviously the fact I'm a huge Toy Story fan, but sentimental value also being my first pop I ever bought. And then that same day I bought the Heisenberg from Breaking Bad for only, I believe, $15 because it was that price at the time on the secondary market. And then now it is reached, I believe, somewhere in the 100s, like 150s or something. So that day, that's how I started my pop collection. And then I think MD started a bit after.
Yeah, I feel like I've told this story a couple times on the podcast. Basically, when pop started popping up a lot at, let's say, Hamilton Comic Con or stores, I didn't really like them at all. I thought it was a weird style. And the reason was because, let's say, with something like WWE, or let's even say with the Muppets, I have these collections of figures that are super detailed with the Palisades Muppets, as well as the Jack Specific and the Mattel wrestling figures, where I figured, why would I buy these figures that aren't posable? They're kind of chibi like, and I really hated it at first. And then I kind of started coming around to it when I seen the Say by the Bell set. I said, oh, okay, like this Say by the Bell doesn't really have merchandise. There was like a card lineup, and you might find a t-shirt here and there, but not even that very often. So I bought the Say by the Bell pops. I got the whole set, and that's kind of what got me into it. And at the time, I didn't really think that my collection would be where it is today, considering I have over 1,000 pieces of Funko product in my collection. But after that, I started collecting like the Sesame Street pops. I started collecting some stuff that you don't really see get merchandise, and that's kind of what brought me into Funko. And maybe that is a reason why I like the ad icons so much, because you don't very often find a action figure or a figure of, let's say, Lucky the Leprechaun or Toucan Sam or the cereal monsters and stuff like that. I mean, nowadays you kind of do a little bit more. There was the action figure set that they put out for Count Chocula and Frankenberry, as well as sometimes in the cereal. I know DK collects some of those little figurines where you can get some of these characters, but for the most part, you don't really see add-on icon characters getting a lot of physical merchandise. So yeah, that's basically what got me into Funko, is just the niche of having these products that you just don't see. And obviously now I do have a lot of other pops that do have figures, let's say with the Simpsons or WWE or any other thing, I guess.
Next question comes from the biggest G we know. That's at Royal City Pop _G. Mike Fanton, what's up, pal? What was the worst pop you ever bought and regretted?
Ooh.
That's a tough question because there's not really like pops that like I go out and say like, oh, well, yeah, I regret buying this. Like if anything, the easiest answer I could say is like when you get a mystery box, because obviously you're not going to always get pops that you like in a mystery box. But I think if anything, it would be like back when I first started collecting and I had the Pop in a Box subscription, and I look at some of the pops that like even I'm trying to sell now, and it's like, why did I put the check mark on that to tell them to put that in the box? Because I don't really care. Like I have like Guavian from Star Wars that like I don't even remember that character in, I think it's Force Awakens that character made its debut. And then I have like Deadshot from Suicide Squad. So I still kind of wish that I had the mindset as terms to collecting pops back then that I do now, as terms to what pieces that I should collect and the reasons why to collect those. So I guess if anything, the worst pop is going to be between Guavian and Unmasked Deadshot.
I mean, yeah, going off of what you said, that's always the thing, right? Like if I knew back then what I knew now, how different the collection would be, and whether it's value or just these pieces that are so hard to find. But as to terms to a pop that I regret buying, I feel like there's not much. I don't really just go and buy a pop and like, oh, like I don't need this pop, I'm gonna buy it. Why not? Sometimes I do. I mean, sometimes I even buy collections and I sit on them for a while until I can sell them. But when it comes to a pop that I regret buying, there's only two that I can really think of. The first one is a more newer pop into my collection, and that is the Young Obesius, the Amazon exclusive. I put in a back order for this, I mean, months and months ago, probably 8 months ago now, on Amazon, because it was sold out. And then I received it not too long ago and it was very damaged. So that's kind of one that I think about, but I don't regret that. I mean, that's a pop that I need for my Simpsons collection. The pop that I will go with for this answer is the common Grumpy Cat pop. And the reason for that is because I found it one day. I don't even remember where it was. I think it might have been my mom was at some craft show or something, and she sent me a picture. She's like, "Hey, do you want me to pick this up for you?" And I said yes. And the only reason why I regret it is because sometimes this happens with Funko is you buy this certain pop and a better one ends up getting released. And I mean, there's the flocked Grumpy Cat pop, which is the better one. So now if I want to add that to my collection, I have to go and I have to find it. I have to pay the money for it, and then I have two Grumpy Cat pops in my collection where the common one is clearly not as good. I mean, it's a cat, it should be flocked, and then I have to go and try to sell that or give it away or do something with it. So really, I guess that's my biggest regret, but even that is very minuscule.
These last two questions we have are both from Pat over at Pops and Props. Shout out to him. So the first one that he asked, what's a line of Funko Pop you want created that hasn't been created yet? Which we both kind of went in depth on this at the beginning of this year, actually, with our wish list pod, realistically. But I will always say that my number one Funko Pop lineup that I've been wanting Funko to make since I started collecting. It's crazy because I'm at a point of collecting where Funko has pretty much checked off a lot of things. Like we got a new Knuckles recently. They made Green Day pops in 2021, which was like pretty much on the top of the list. But the set that has always been on the top of the list that I've been wanting Funko to make and they haven't yet is for the 1998 film Small Soldiers. Obviously, you'll see the video cover right now. The best way I can explain it, especially if you're like listening to this and not actually looking at your screen, is that it's a PG-13 Toy Story is the best way I can always explain Small Soldiers. But I just think they're characters that I feel like are meant to be popified in a way because they are action figures, the characters, or at least most of them. And I would love for them to go down the route that they did with the Jingle All the Way set. And not only do they make pops, but they dabble into actually making the big figures to go along with them, just like they did with the Turbo Man. So with the Small Soldiers, even having the exact detail of the way the boxes were, which are huge with like the crazy big windows added to them.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the one that me and DK talk about is Small Soldiers. And I guess that is another thing that I have been collecting basically my whole life. I mean, the movie came out when I was like 1 years old, and I've always collected these Small Soldiers merchandise when I can find it. So I really cherish that collection. And sometimes I even do give some pieces away to DK when I find some better ones for my collection. So yeah, that is the big one is Small Soldiers. I mean, how crazy would it be to get pops, whether it's just a couple or whether it is a large wave? And then like DK said, with the Jingle All the Way, which I am pointing at on my screen right now, which you guys can't see, with the Turbo Man figure. That would be amazing if Funko was able to do that and recreate these figures, because it's been a long time since we've seen Small Soldiers merchandise, and why not? Like, I just don't understand why Funko hasn't done it yet. Obviously, I feel like they would want to. But besides that, I feel like the one big one that has been on my list for basically ever, and sometimes I talk about it, is That 70s Show. I mean, it's probably my favorite sitcom of all time. We got Friends pops, obviously, which I don't have the OG set, but That 70s Show, a huge sitcom for me. So I feel like that is a wave of pops that would be so simple. You can get pop rides, you can get single pops, you can do 2 packs. And then obviously with the new That 90s Show, I mean, that opens up for more characters. Obviously, the show did well. I mean, it's renewed for another season at least, or maybe 2. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, I think That 70s Show and That 90s Show pops would do phenomenal. I can't believe that we haven't seen That 70s Show pops. And hopefully one day we do, because that is definitely at the top of my list besides Small Soldiers.
And then the other question and the final question, not only just from Pops and Props, but overall that we're going to be talking about. And I think this is actually a perfect way to end off this whole podcast. What are your long-term plans with your YouTube channel? I honestly don't know how to really answer that. I think the best way I can say it is hopefully we keep continuing riding the hype train until it falls off the track, I guess, in the sense of like, especially with like the recent news about the way that Funko is dealing with their company and like the way that like we keep hearing about the future of Pops. It's like, what happens if one day Funko decides to just file bankruptcy, or not really file bankruptcy, but they like really go down and a lot of people lose interest? What will happen with our channel then? That's kind of a thing that I haven't really thought about, because like we mentioned, like 80%, 90% of our channel is basically on Funko. So when it's based off that, what's the future of what would be MDK Collects? I don't exactly know. I mean, we want to pump up a lot of content for you for as long as possible. I guess that's really the future. I don't really know how to really elaborate on that. I don't know what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I definitely do have some things to say. So the short answer is to keep grinding it out. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time. When it comes to this channel, obviously we have been doing it for 4 years, I think, at the top of my head. But the YouTube thing, me and DK have been making YouTube videos together for a long time. I would say since like 2009, we've been making, whether it's just fun videos that we want to post on YouTube, or if we actually make series. There's been a ton of series that me and DK have done together, whether it's with wrestling or with a certain grandmother, or whether it's just all these different things that we've tried with YouTube. And this one is working. Obviously, we're still pumping out content, and it's been years. So I think we'll probably still continue to do that. Obviously, in the new year, we have changed our name to MDK Collects, which does open up a variety of different things we can do. Obviously, you guys have seen some Pokemon card content. Like I said, maybe I can show off some of my McDonald's collection. There's a lot of things that we can do, because we don't just collect Funko, we collect a lot of stuff. So let us know in the comments down below, like, what are some things that you collect and you would like to see us showcase? Because I basically have just about everything. I have something for everything, basically. But besides that, with Funko, if they were to ever go downhill, which kind of seems unlikely, it kind of does seem likely at the same time, though, I feel like it doesn't really matter content wise. Maybe it might be a little bit harder to make this brand new content of like, okay, we're going to go Funko Pop hunting at GameStop if Funko is no longer producing pops. You can't really do that. But it also, the market will not be quite as saturated with all these new sets and all these new variations of characters, which does make Funko Pop hunting, I guess, at that point, a little bit harder, which is a little bit more interesting. So that could be interesting for the channel, but I don't see that happening for quite some time. I think that we still have a long time to pump out great content for you guys, and also do some different collab videos with people like Tristan or Pops and Props or Spencer. Just awesome community, and I feel like if we all stick together in it, I mean, we can all be here for a very long time.
All right, so that is going to be the end of this edition of a Funko Popcast. If you enjoyed our Getting to Know Us Again podcast, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and definitely hit the notification bell so you're notified of when content like this gets released. But anyways, we're out of here. 1, 2, 3, I'm out of here.
Can I have a cookie? Peace in, peace out.